Thank you, Christian, for joining me into this Blab session. Well, the discussion today, Christian Joret, you're apparently, you have a lot of knowledge with regarding to the Raspberry Pi, but I'm very pleased to have you here, and I'm really wondering, because I don't know nothing about the Raspberry, nothing.
Thank you.
A little bit, but
you.
You're here for explaining us. It's not fruit, huh? Or is it fruit or Raspberry Pi?
It is a fruit. It is a fruit, like apple is a fruit. There are some bananas in the game, but why is it called a raspberry and not an apple? Because the name was already taken, I guess. And it's much smaller. Also, it's much smaller than an apple. It's in fact, it has the form factor of a credit card. And how can you define the Raspberry? In fact, it's a stripped down smartphone. It has no GSM or cellular connectivity built in. It has no Wi-Fi. It has no Bluetooth, but it has what a smartphone does not have. It has an Ethernet. It has two normal, or four in the latest model, 4 USBs. So it's very open. And I think the most important thing also is it has a series of pins that are extremely open. And contrary to, for example, either a Macintosh or a tablet or an iPhone, for example, it's extremely easy to connect to, for example,
So this is
having the possibility to.
This is a computer. What you're referring to? Then it's a PC. It's a.
This is. It's a full-blown computer. What they call a SoC, a system on a chip. So it has RAM. It was 1 gig RAM. It has a clock speed, I think, of 900 hertz or something like that. It has, the connectivity you see. You can add a USB wireless adapter. You can add a Bluetooth wireless adapter. Of course, Ethernet. It has an output HDMI that you can put on a normal TV. You can even, with some tweaking, you can add a VGA display. So you can use it in an existing environment and in a new environment. So think of it as power of a smartphone, but getting a normal standardized PC keyboard, a mouse, a video camera, for example. It has a direct slot for a video camera made by some supplier for the Raspberry. You could put a webcam also on it. So,
Christian, there's a little issue. Perhaps
what makes it different?
You can opt out and come in, because we miss you on screen. We don't have you on screen anymore. Can you opt out? Just yes, Sheila. You need a keyboard, and you need an external monitor as well. Apparently, it's just a little device. And that's a good question. It's and a mouse. Yes. It's open. Huh? The seat is open, Alfredo. Okay. Sorry. Thank you, Alfredo. I forgot about it.
Okay.
And thank you, Christian. We had here a comment from Sheila with regarding to the BlackBerry. She said, okay, you need to put an external monitor, a keyboard,
Yes.
to be able to work and a mouse. But can you compare it with a Chrome box? I remember that Google came out with that little Chrome. Is that the same? Is that why should I buy the Raspberry then? If there's a Chrome box.
I would say the Chrome box is a closed system. It's delivered as something that's fully finished with sleek interface and things like that. The Raspberry Pi, in fact, is a Linux computer, so you boot into a command line, and afterwards you start with a command called startx. You start the graphical interface. So it's more, I would say a hacker tool or something like that. But it's meant to be something that, generates an interest of what happens behind the screen. The purpose of the Chromebook or a tablet from Apple or whatever is a consumer product that is used with the best interface possible, but you can't get into the system, you can't understand what's happened behind, and you can't hack a Chromebook, or you can't hack a tablet to make what do we want, for example. To tell you, it's a Unix computer, it's a Linux computer. It's running a version of the famous distribution of Linux called Debian. But for example, Red Hat is also a distribution, has come out with their own distribution for the Raspberry Pi. I heard.
So there are different distributions. Sorry that I interrupt you, Christian, because I was wondering. I see Alfredo talking about Raspberry Pi tools. What does he mean with that? What can we do with that device? In fact, is it used to you can't do any harm, because is it very expensive, the Raspberry in comparison to the Chromebooks?
It is not expensive at all. It's about $35. So you can't get cheaper. Maybe there are. I heard there were even lower priced small computers. What do you call them? Credit card computers, I guess. It's an open market. It's just beginning, and they have competition in slightly more expensive credit card computers and even less expensive computers. But where the Raspberry stands out is in the support they have through a non-profit foundation. They have the RaspberryPi.org, and that's the foundational site. And you can't get a more documented site than that thing. Your question about what do you do with the Raspberry? You can do with the Raspberry most things you can do with any Linux or any computer. The enormous advantage is that Linux installs applications through packages. And for example, even though the majority of the applications are written for Intel or AMD 386 or 486 or x86 or 64-bit machines, etc., I installed things that maybe people never installed on a Raspberry Pi, but it works as if it was written for the Raspberry Pi. So it means that it's difficult to say, but you could get the dashboard of a BMW and put it on your bike or something like that, and it would work with no expert knowledge required or whatever. So it's an experimental tool, but it goes much further than that.
Yes.
I call it subversive because of the price, and also because you can consider it as, for example, in the educational world, you could think of it as bring your own device. You know the concept of bring your own device.
I see that Alfredo has shared an article where they list 10 cool uses of the Raspberry. Just stay here. I'm going to browse them through, and I want a little comment of you for each of them. So just to have an idea of you. So one of the usages I see is media streaming. You can use it as a media streamer.
Yes, sure. So they have they have an XBMC, for example. I guess Alfredo is hinting of that. So it's a package built around an operating system, also a Linux operating system, but the interface you see is the application you need to do streaming. And that is, extremely. So in fact, it's a media player in Linux, and you have everything you need. And probably through the HDMI, you can get the sound and you can get the picture. So it's not revolutionary as a concept, because there have been many media players, and there are many media players. But it's the first time you only have to disperse $35 to do that. And the storage, for example, it used to be the SD cards, and now it's the smaller ones.
You can plug that. You can plug that in.
Micro SD, if you see.
Okay.
Yeah, you absolutely, and everything is on that. And you can, through the USB outputs, you can even add an extra hard disk. For example, you would boot from the SD card, and you would use the rest as a storage.
I'm going to browse the 9 other points just to go quickly through them.
Yeah.
You can use them. You can use it as a no, just to.
It's a quiz or something like that.
For example, you can use it as an arcade machine. Apparently, arcade machine. They mean more something for gaming and emulating even a Commodore 64 and so on.
Absolutely.
So that's
and a Nintendo and a Spectrum, ZX Spectrum 48K or something like that. All the 8-bit machines are, but that's not typical on the Raspberry. It's typical of any computer, or any Linux computer, sure, has emulations of whatever other computer, and then of course, if you can emulate that on an even smaller machine with a small price tag,
it's even a tablet computer.
It's great.
So you could actually use it as a tablet. Perhaps you can point. Absolutely. You have you have suppliers. I think of Adafruit. It's an American supplier who has brought a lot of peripherals that are pluggable onto the motherboard of the Raspberry, and it becomes a touchscreen, for example, or you can drive stepper motors. It's too rich, in fact. You can also use it for home automation.
To explain
so that's apparently light switch.
Yes, I would say.
Perhaps you have a comment on that, Christian.
Yes, it's more than my home automation. A few weeks ago, I went to the University of Trier in Germany, and they showed us a port of the PLC language. And PLC language is, in fact, the language that is used into factory automation. And they showed a small greenhouse with sensors like humidity or temperature, commands like opening the windows, etc. And it was done. It used to be done on a full PC, and they have ported it on the Raspberry. So it goes down tremendously in price, and it opens applications for smaller companies that were not able to automate.
Yeah.
On,
I see
on
car
that
computer
level of
means
price.
a combination of car and computer. So like you pointed out, you can have a tablet and you have,
Yes.
I guess, a system to help you with GPS.
No, GPS, for example, it's one of the sensors you can plug on a Raspberry, but I think the car computer is in fact a diagnostic tool. Every car, more recent than I would say 10 years or 15 years or something like that, has in fact an interface on board. And this is the same, in fact, for all cars. And someone has written an application on the Raspberry. You plug the Raspberry into that slot or something like that of the car, and you can, for example, see, I don't know, I'm not a car technician either, so you can see if the compression of your cylinders is okay, if the something wrong with the electrical wiring on it's a diagnostic tool that can be used.
Great. There is one point from
very
Alfredo where he said, controlling robots. What do I have to imagine myself when he says controlling robots? Do I need to be afraid now when I hear that?
No, it's quite the contrary. I think it's meant to get over the myths about angry robots and thinking what are robots normally, or things that can be driven by a Raspberry are stepper motors or sensors of distance or of pressure, etc., etc. So I know there is a hand, for example, that can be driven and that can pick up objects on your table, and you can drive it with a Raspberry. So I would say within the limits of the memory, etc., etc., the Raspberry can do what other computers can do, but
could it also? I'm just while thinking now of the record. Can it be used for 3D printing? The Raspberry.
There is a 3D printer that has that uses the Raspberry as the central computer driving the 3D printers. Yeah, I think the best way of learning about, you should just type, for example, in YouTube, Raspberry Pi or Raspberry Pi 2, for example, and you would see how many instructional videos have been posted to YouTube regarding the Raspberry, what you can do with it. I think one of the most exciting things is that it comes also built in with the mathematical language. And normally on computers, it's something expensive, and for educational purposes, the foundation, Raspberry Pi Foundation, negotiated a deal with Mathematica for Wolfram, and it's delivered when you buy one. You have that as a standard application, so you don't pay any license fee or something like that, and the code is identical. So you could ask your Raspberry to compute certain very difficult mathematical problems on the Raspberry. It will take probably some minutes more than on a supercomputer or whatever.
Yes.
But you could use the same code. So it's meant to, normally you don't, in a school, for example, I don't think there are many schools or where everybody could have access to Mathematica. And normally in a school, I don't know, you have slightly more time than in the business world. So the time difference, because of the slowness of, not slowness, but the less speediness of the Raspberry.
So it's a great tool for
learn
educational purposes. That's, I think, clear.
Educational, and also I think, and this has been confirmed by Microsoft, it could be used as a cheap front end to the Internet of Things. So it's I know Internet of Things is a buzzword right now. It's I remember in the first days of the internet, there were already guys who had programmed their Coca-Cola vending machine to make sure they knew the temperature and they knew how many bottles of Coke there were still left in the machine and things like that. That's an example of the Internet of things. But normally you needed something more powerful, and here you have the usual Linux machine that you can access as you want, and you don't. In fact, you will probably, with your car, if you have a car, you will consume more gas by filling filling in your car with petrol and you would spend more on the petrol.
It's a no-brainer. It's really a no-brainer. I think I'm going to order one just to play with it and get myself a screen and use this keyboard and mouse just to experiment with it and see what you can do. Because the possibilities are really versatile. Now, as from your point of view, what interests you most with regarding to that device? What triggers you most with regarding to the Raspberry Pi?
What triggered me, in fact, I had a fascination for mathematics. I wasn't very good at mathematics, but I said, why is it? And I'm not the only one with, I guess, that problem. And I think many people are afraid to do mathematics because you have so many chances to make errors. And if you have a good application and you let do the more error-prone things by the computer, it will help you understand the real purpose of the mathematics instead of being afraid of mathematics just by having calculation errors that you had to do on paper and things like that. It tidies up your vision of mathematics just with a tool. I consider that as a leverage more than a computer. I would say I would use that term other than it's a very powerful computer, whatever. No, it's a leverage, and it's not intimidating. You can, I would say, it doesn't take any reformatting or something. If you're blocked in something, whatever, it doesn't happen frequently. But if you do an error, you just put out the power cord, and it's powered by the power supply of a mobile phone. So it's a micro USB power supply that I had from I think my Samsung or something like that, and I use it. So it's it also allows
the Raspberry Pi doesn't consume a lot of electricity.
Uses,
then, if I understand well, it doesn't consume.
No, it's based. The internal CPU is an ARM CPU, and I think it's a RISC machine, and the purpose of ARM was to make a processor you couldn't bake an egg on like other CPUs from makes I can't pronounce. The typical Intel or something like that. They use very much
the first
power.
Pentiums,
and so you when you think of a Pentium or a Xeon or whatever, you think of ventilators. You hear about cooling, etc. This one has no. This is the older model. There is no ventilator inside, and it's pure passive. For example, your smartphone has no ventilator also. So your smartphone works on a battery. This one runs on mains, but it runs on the same power and has also low consumption.
I mean,
it's all a bit geeky, but I think it's because it's non-intimidating. I guess it will invite many people to experiment with computers, things they wouldn't have done either as a kid or an adult with a normal computer, because you should have reformatted your hard disk or something like that. And here you can say, okay, I'll buy myself a small micro SD card or something like that. That is maybe something that is used in my smartphone or in my camera or something like that. And I will go to the internet, download myself an image of a certain operating system, and I will try if it works on the Raspberry. So this is very open, unintimidating, and affordable.
Yes.
So
okay.
Most things are set,
I do have one last question, because we talked about Internet of Things. Is there one example that you use it for with Internet of Things? Do you have an idea that you say, oh, I could use it for, I don't know.
Yes, I would say to tell you that Raspberry Pi is recognized by players like Microsoft, for example, who has put out Windows 10, especially an edition Internet of Things Windows 10, especially for the Raspberry Pi 2. And for example, a company like Oracle, that's not a small company, gives away, I think in the UK and in the US, gives away to schools a kit with the Raspberry and a small meteorological station. So you can log wind speeds, humidity, temperature, etc., etc. And of course, the purpose of Oracle is to let people consolidate all those big data from different schools on an Oracle database, probably a 12C or something like that, and then do analysis like they would with any big data stream.
It's impressive.
So yeah,
the first part of the answer you gave, it means, if I understand you well, that you can run Windows 10 on a Raspberry. You can, okay.
Yeah. I'll put some Yeah. Just a moment. I will.
That's impressive. That's what.
I will put it. Yeah, maybe. Just a moment. I don't know if it's right. I just posted the public release of Microsoft's Raspberry Pi 10 IoT Core for Raspberry 2. It's an article on a website called betanews.com, and that shows the potential, but it's not limited, I would say, to Microsoft. There are even today, for example, I saw the FreeBSD has been set to for the Raspberry Pi. So it's immense. Every day comes with a new distribution or a new. Maybe you don't know exactly, or maybe not that many people are familiar with FreeBSD, but it stands for Berkeley System Distribution, and it's a kind of Linux. It's a Unix, in fact, and everything that was developed around the internet, the TCP/IP things, and were Linux developed on BSD systems.
Well,
and now they have.
Well, this rounds up a little bit our interview about Raspberry Pi. Now, for the audience, we have prepared, or Christian has prepared, some takeaways. So, as a gesture to thank you for being there today in our broadcast, I'm going to put a URL where you can, perhaps Christian can explain a little bit what the takeaways are.
Yes, the takeaways are magazines in a PDF format, and they are brought to you by the Raspberry Pi Foundation. They have taken over a magazine called MacPi, and I have put into a folder the 10 latest issues of the magazine. So they're free to use, free to distribute. You can order them also on print. It's not a pirated version. You can download them from the Raspberry Pi foundational site, and I will put this also in the URL. So this is the place to go. But yeah, I think Johan, you have access to the thing I uploaded.
What do you mean
or
with uploaded?
What do you do?
I'm clicking on the last.
No, I upload the PDFs.
Well, when I look at the takeaways, in fact, I see that, as you said, the brochures, which are accessible for download. It takes a little bit.
Yeah.
There are in total 6 the MacPi PDF documents which are available for download. So and there is one on Windows 10 on Raspberry Pi, by the way. So people who are interested in running Windows 10 on a Raspberry, there is an interesting document as well, I see. So, but don't miss out on the other documents, because I see there is one about amazing Pi projects. So yes, this is great stuff, Christian. I need to thank you for sharing this with us. It's just awesome, really. I would like to thank the audience and thank Christian again for doing this broadcast today. See you next time. Bye.